It seemed like the end of Christianity. Gen Z was the most atheist, lonely, depressed, and hedonistic generation in human history. But these past couple of years, something has changed. Gen Z has reversed the decline of Christianity. For the first time ever, children are more religious than their parents, and there's more interest in traditional Christianity than ever before. How did this happen? Gen Z was the first generation to be raised in a secular, post-Christian environment. They were the guinea pigs for the experiment of secularism, so they got to see the effects of secularism firsthand. So here's what it was like growing up Gen Z. Welcome to school. Hope you're excited to sit still and do mindless work for 8 hours every day. Not really. That sounds like a mental disorder. These pills should help. Okay, so how do I get good grades? By learning and being creative? No. School is designed for 20 highlighter girls who are neat and organized and submit meaningless homework on time, not for guys like you with energy and motivation. Now here's why you should hate your country, race, sex, and religion. Okay, now I'm gonna try to get a girlfriend. Girlfriend? These days people just do casual hookups and situationships, and we're only interested in like 10% of guys, which does not include you. And you're happy about all this? Oh no, I'm dying inside, but I can't act otherwise due to social pressure. If you don't get your grades up, you're gonna fail. What about the kids who never go to class or do homework but graduate anyway? Our school isn't allowed to fail those kids due to PR. Well, I have no motivation to work either. What's the point of all this? Hey now, if you get all A's and get into a good college, you might even afford a tiny apartment someday. Well, that's depressing. You're depressed? Seems like you need therapy. No, I just want to know what I'm even working for in life. Sounds like a chemical imbalance. These pills will make you numb to it all. This was a pretty normal experience for Gen Z men. They grew up lost, hopeless, lonely, and with no meaning in their lives. They also grew up surrounded by wokeness, which celebrated many groups of people, but said that men were the oppressor group and needed to take a back seat in society. The only voices speaking against the status quo were Christians and the cultural right, which have always had an uneasy on and off alliance with each other. There's a lot of overlap between them, because they often support the same things, but for different reasons. While not all Christians are on the right, and not everyone on the right is Christian, the right was an important stepping stone for many young men coming to Christianity. If we're gonna be honest, most young men didn't go from weed-smoking atheists to Bible-believing Christians overnight. For most of them, the first step in deconstructing leftism was honestly looking at internet memes that mock wokeness, so they could see how silly all of it was and eventually realize the emptiness of secular society. For many young men, the first step away from leftism is skepticism of the whole LGBTQ movement, which causes them to get cancelled, which further radicalizes them. Since leftism is a rival religion to Christianity, it's often necessary to lose faith in leftism before you can begin to consider Christianity. Not only did Gen Z lose faith in leftism, they lost faith in modern society generally. Because previous generations were living off of the benefits of Christian society, they were able to have more faith in the material things of this world. But since society for Gen Z looked more bleak, they had to turn to spiritual things for meaning in life. This can loosely be applied to the generations. Previous generations were able to take a successful society for granted and saw less of a need to turn to God, but that made them weaker and less religious, which made society worse, which is making Gen Z turn to God. This also applies to countries. It's a common pattern that after centuries of Christianity, especially Protestant Christianity, countries will become insanely successful, but then due to their success, they'll forget about God. This is also the pattern we see in the Book of Judges many times over. The things that people often get meaning from, like money, romance, achievements, friendship, and self-image, are not necessarily bad things, but when they become ultimate things, meaning things that you can't have meaning without, then they become idols, which means false gods. Now sometimes when people lose all of these things and can't get any meaning from them, they turn to Christianity because that's something that can never go away. The reason people are starting to favor Christianity over secularism is because Christianity offers objective goodness, truth, and beauty. Modern secular society says those things are just subjective opinions, which inevitably leads to degeneracy, lies, and ugliness in modern society. Traditional Christian philosophy calls goodness, truth, and beauty the transcendentals, because they're all objective, they're all connected to each other, and they're all rooted in God's nature, because goodness, truth, and beauty each reflect God in various ways. But modern secular philosophy questions the existence of God, so goodness, truth, and beauty become nothing but human opinions. That's why they say things like, beauty is in the eye of the beholder, or live your truth. Those are actually secular modernist sayings. Since objective goodness, truth, and beauty don't exist according to secularism, any claims to objective goodness, truth, or beauty by the church, for example, are seen as tools of oppression that need to be deconstructed. Take goodness, for example. According to Christianity, morals come from God, and therefore there's a clear line between good and evil. So the so-called traditional family structure is not just based on tradition, but it's actually prescribed by God because it's necessary for human flourishing. Secularism looks at that same family structure and calls it oppressive because it's just based on arbitrary restrictions of people's rights. So they do everything they can to deconstruct it. They encourage women to be childless workers into their 40s. They encourage young women to party and sleep around and never settle down. They promote no-fault divorce, which breaks up families. They promote the LGBTQ movement, which breaks down the barriers between genders. And they promote abortion. Previous generations saw the absence of restrictions as freedom, but more and more young people are starting to realize how empty that life is and are desiring a traditional family. Now let's talk about truth. Christians believe that truth comes from God, revealed in the Bible, but once we understand that, we can also study science, because science is the study of God's creation. Christian ideas laid the groundwork for modern science because they believed the world was created by an intelligent God. It's why Christians started the modern university system. Most of the Ivy League schools were started by Bible-believing Calvinists. So Christianity has never been opposed to science. What secularism tried to do was take the science without the Christianity and build a worldview based on the physical, ignoring the metaphysical. But they realized that they had no objective reason to believe anything that they believed, and now secularism can't answer basic scientific questions like what is a woman. Young people are starting to see how ridiculous this is and turning to traditional Christianity for answers about the world. Many traditional forms of Christianity, like Presbyterian, Lutheran, Catholic, and Orthodox, have detailed theological systems that answer all the questions modern society ignores. Now, beauty is something that even many modern Christians misunderstand. Traditional Christianity believes beauty is objective and it points us to God. Traditionally, churches were designed to look like colonies of heaven here on earth. And the traditional Western church architecture style, the Gothic style, is meant to be upward pointing because it shows the tension between heaven and earth. Traditional architecture reflects the beauty of nature because Christians believe God designed the beauty of nature to glorify himself. Traditional art was about living up to beauty standards, but modern art is about challenging them. People will walk in a modern art gallery and think, I'm supposed to enjoy this? Well, no, you're not, because that's not the purpose of modern art. The purpose of modern art is just to rebel against beauty. It's the same in music. Many of the best traditional classical composers like Bach and Handel were devout Christians who believed they were glorifying God through their music. Beethoven was the first to try and use music as a form of self-expression by challenging traditional musical norms. And although he was a great composer, everyone else tried to copy him and push the boundaries of music more and more until it sounded like a cat walking on a piano. So goodness, truth, and beauty are pushing young people towards Christianity, specifically traditional Christianity. There aren't exactly a bunch of young people flocking to non-denominational evangelicalism because it doesn't have beauty, because it's not meant to be historically rooted. And even though it does have some truth, it doesn't have the most deep and intellectual truth because, once again, it's not really rooted in the intellectual traditions of the church. Previous generations of the church actually gave into modernism by making worship more contemporary to try and attract young people, but these days young people desire tradition more than ever across all denominations. Aesthetics have been especially powerful in converting young men to Christianity. Video games trained young men to appreciate the medieval crusader aesthetic because they associated it with adventure, which is something all young men desire. And up until recently, the only way for young men to get adventure in the modern world was video games, but now many of them feel like they have an opportunity to crusade for the old Christian society that was taken from them. The reason it's been taken from them is every society is built on a particular religion, and American society is built on mainline Protestantism. So ever since that got hijacked by liberalism, so did society. Many people have responded by leaving these churches, but a couple years ago I started a movement called Operation Reconquista to retake these churches. And since then, thousands of people have joined the movement, many of whom are pastors. Young men need a mission, and this could be it. If you want to get involved, we have a map, which will be linked in the description of this video, where you can find a church within these denominations that still holds to the essentials of Christianity, and can be a good base for building back up these denominations. We also have a Discord community, which will be linked in the description, for mainline Protestants who want to fellowship with each other and encourage each other in rebuilding the church. The reason I bring this up is because, as fun as it is posting about Christianity on the internet, we need to direct this energy towards building up the church in real life. And although Christianity is good for culture, we shouldn't be Christian because of that. It's good for culture because it's true. The real meaning of Christianity is not being a based gigachad who crusades for the culture on the internet. It's about recognizing that God came down from heaven and died for your sins so you could be forgiven and have eternal life. But you don't need to wait until you die to go to heaven. The kingdom of heaven begins here on earth, and you can participate in building it up in anticipation of when Christ shall return to restore all things.